Hey folks, Dustin Siggins here, Proven Media Solutions, and I'm with Samantha Riel. Sam and I have known each other for about 20 years, and what we're going to be talking about today is how earlier this year, my company hired her as a consultant to come in and help us scale our operations using AI in a very systematic fashion. I had been resistant to the idea because it seemed like AI was there, but some people didn't seem to know how to use it. It seemed very popular, potentially faddish. And then there was a need for it. And I approached Sam, and she did a really systematic approach that not only has helped us, as you'll hear later, gross more revenue and increase our efficiency the time, increase our output without decreasing quality. But it's also a process that I think any PR team can utilize. And Sam is much more of an expert on the AI operational side. So we'll use my company, Proven Media Solutions, as a case study and how PR teams can use AI to increase productivity, increase output without decreasing quality. Sam, if you want to introduce yourself and kind of how this show came about 4 months ago when we started talking about AI, that'd be great.
Yeah, I would love to. And thanks again, Dustin, for having me back on this show.
Yes.
Much appreciated. I think it's my second or third time actually.
Mhm.
I'm not, joining you. So thank you very much for that. It's always fun to come on and to chat with you. And so I think so. This is a really interesting scenario that I see all the time. People come to me frequently, not just you, obviously. People come to me frequently. In fact, I wish I had a quarter for every time I was either part of a conversation or was brought into a conversation where we said, what happens if we grow so fast? What do we do? How do we actually, how do we handle that with our current team without stressing them out? Or do we hire and then hope that we stay at that level without needing to scale back, right? And so that was
Right.
the conversation that you and I had as part of just a normal catch up on a random Tuesday. It was, hey, Sam, this is what we're doing. What do you think about that? And that's where I said, you know what would be really interesting, Dustin? An AI assistant might be a good thing to help with here. And we can get into, I've already seen it in the comments introducing this, the quality, if you can tell it's written by
I was
AI,
about to
all
say
those things.
something.
We'll
Yep.
get into all of that stuff. But basically,
Yep.
that was how this all came about. It was fun.
Well, and you raise a good point. Let's jump right into it. A lot of people post on LinkedIn about I can tell when someone uses AI.
Yeah.
This is a common thing, and I'm not trained in it, but I look at it and go, yeah, that person probably did. I don't really care personally. I care about the outcome of the quality of the writing. I don't care how it gets there. If you use a pencil or a computer, I don't care if someone who puts on my roof uses a hammer or a nail gun, as long as it's the price, quality, and time we agreed on. And I
Mhm.
feel the same is true with what we do, producing press releases and op-eds and other content. But the big thing that we discussed, where initially I had some potentially distrust in the process, was is this going to look like it was written by AI? So let's tackle that common objection first, because it was something you had to overcome with me.
Yeah. And so I do a lot of work, and this is preaching to the choir, I know already with you, Dustin, but for the audience, just so everyone knows, I do a lot of work with people, processes, and systems. I call it the
Yep.
scale without chaos framework. So it's all about the
Mhm.
fact that all business issues fall into one of those three buckets, and so do the solutions: people, processes, and systems. So
Mhm.
when we're talking about using AI, it's a way to scale all three of those things efficiently. Now, with that, there's always with any tool, with any new thing, there is a risk of you're either scaling the good or you're scaling the bad. And the nice thing about when we started to work together is that Proven Media Solutions has an interesting business model. I will say an interesting business model, the fact that that you help other agencies to fill their media gaps, right? To fill where they might need some help, right? And so there's an opportunity for you to scale up quickly, or you might need to scale up quickly. So you could have a whole bunch
Yep.
of people coming to you at once, all at the same time, and saying, hey, we need these things.
Yep.
And so when you look at all of that, you obviously had some systems in place that we could use right off the bat that worked. So let me can I get into that? Is this a good time to get into the here's the steps that we took to make sure that it was the good quality work, or do you want to kind of take it in another direction first?
So let's actually lay out a little bit. I don't want to spend too much time talking about exactly what we did, not because I'm afraid of people understanding the sausage making, but I wanted other people to be able to see how it applies to them. So
Fair.
let me lay out the challenge we were facing. So this year we're on track to grow about 70% as a company. And our we have a number of clients of different sizes, and our biggest client said to us, "Wow, you're really busy with us." And I said, "Yes, we are." Or, "You're busy with us." And I said, "Yep, we are." And then our point of contact said, "Well, if we get these couple of clients we're looking for, you're going to be," and she put in quotation marks in front of her team members, "very busy with us." Okay. How do we scale with a limited size team to prepare for that? But if I hire somebody for one client, well, geez, then I have to possibly let them go. Or it creates other financial challenges for the company. It creates human challenges and culture challenges. So I approached a couple of folks. My business partner was one of them who said, well, this is an opportunity for growth. This is a chance to go and seek out other business that may be smaller so that there's not an imbalance with with a bigger client getting even bigger. That was a good, okay, that means we're having even more business than I thought if we go out for these other smaller pieces of business that maybe we weren't previously considering. And then I said, okay, there's only one way that I've heard of to scale in a way that can increase productivity, potentially keep the quality, but then scale back as necessary without creating financial, human, and company culture impacts. And that is AI. And that's what I reached out to Sam when we started the conversation. So yeah, let's go from there, because I think at this point the challenge is known and people can now look and say, okay, well, my challenge is 10% different, but I can then appropriately modify the rest of the conversation.
I think actually, I don't think the biggest thing that is an objection when you start talking about AI is always, is it going to sound like a human, right? And
Right.
so when you're dealing with any type of a situation where the work needs to be interesting, it needs to be
Mhm.
authentic, and it needs to be something that really comes from the voice of a particular person, that can
Yes.
sometimes be interesting, right? That can be challenging.
Mhm.
And so what we did was essentially to train an AI assistant that learns the voice of Dustin's authors, the authors of the customers of Proven Media Solutions, and then continues to work through the already established framework that the team has put together it over the years of writing op-eds and other pieces of material for various clients, taking all that and putting it into a very sophisticated prompt. Now, yesterday I saw a comment about PR people are really good about writing prompts, and that couldn't be more true. Actually, I think the PR crew is really good at writing prompts. But back to the whole analogy of garbage in, garbage out. We trained this assistant to make sure that we knew that we were putting in high quality material. And for example, one of the things that we did, and I think this is a thing that will help in terms of helping other people to train assistants when you start getting into that, we give each assistant no less than 5 to 10 other pieces of writing. Also that assistant can learn the syntax, the tone, the how the pace of the person's writing typically is. So that we were able to actually make that assistant become that person, which was a really fun way for us to, it was really fun to see it kind of come to fruition as we were building these. It was like, oh, wow, hey, this is amazing. This is working. We're able to scale this so quickly. And it sounds exactly like the person. Now, that was the first step.
Well, Sam, if I can jump in.
Sure.
Sorry. A couple weeks ago, I had Greg Matusko from Gregory on the show, and he talked about this AI system they built that's cost them $100,000
Oh,
to
wow.
set up that allows them to create a whole crisis communications plan in about 3 minutes with certain
Okay.
inputs for a
Okay.
client. And
Okay.
that seems like a high value, except it took $100,000 and I'm sure hundreds of hours of time. I
Yeah.
don't want to get into how much we paid you for this per se, but I want to clarify that this wasn't just like throwing something together to create the voice.
No.
Before we had our first, even beginning of training meeting, how many did you have? A 12-page Google document that
Yes.
laid out all the detailed components. So if you can get into that a little bit, I think that will help people
Sure.
see how it becomes truly this writing assistant and not just garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah. So it goes back to again the prompt. When you start thinking of an AI assistant or anything AI really, you need to think of it as a junior level team member that you are training. And
Yeah.
so every time, everything that comes back from this AI assistant or whatever you're building, that's the level of mentality. Always saying, okay, I'm going to be training this for a while, and I could be training this for a year, and it still might make a mistake, right? So
Right.
that's
Yeah.
always the approach that I take when we do this. Now,
Mhm.
as I started to work with Proven Media Solutions and to build this, I said, all right, we need to look at a whole bunch of different things before we can actually build this out, which is what are the styles of the current op-eds? Analyze it. So I actually used ChatGPT to do that and to pull all of the recent, I think I pulled the last 6 months worth of recent media that had been published by Proven Media Solutions and pulled all of that in and said, analyze this for all of the things that you would typically work through for writing. And it did. And so then I went through and made sure that all of those different pieces were correct. And then we reviewed it together line by
Right.
line. That was
You
the
will.
part where it was looking at this, it was a 12-page document, you're right, looking at it and saying, does this sound correct or does this sound wrong? And then came the training part, which I
Right.
think, I don't know if it was Dustin's favorite part. It's always my favorite part is the training piece. The reason
Yes.
that we never skip training and actual Q&A in terms of AI is because even though AI seems easy, that doesn't mean that change management is. And even sometimes when we have different things that we're working on AI, sometimes we assume that, oh, well, this should just spit this back and it will be perfect the first time. That's not how it works. And that's not how it worked for Dustin either.
Right.
So
Right.
we had to go in and kind of work through it. So we did some live sessions. And I don't know, Dustin, if you have any takeaways from those live sessions where I made you voice to
Oh,
text.
the most important takeaway was, and it only took me a half an hour to figure this out, because you took charge of that situation. But I was saying, you said, all right, what's your feedback? And I said, well, this paragraph is too vague. And you said, what does that mean? And I said, well, it's too vague. It needs to be more concrete. Okay, Dustin. Well, the most important part of the training on the content creation side, we'll get into other processes later, was being very concrete about the changes. The ROI we're going to talk about later is 10 days after we completed this training for both myself, but also my colleague Jalissa, who now helps all new team members become familiar with the system, to the whole writing team, the whole editing team. After Sam conducted this training, a client said, help, we need to produce 5 op-eds, place them, and also find 5 authors in the next basically 9 days. Because of Sam's training, I was able to produce 5 first round drafts in about 20 minutes each. Not because I threw something in there, but because I said, author name, here are some samples, here are the things we want to see in this piece, here are the target outlets, here's the target audience, and here's the voice, tone, and angle. Then go into each paragraph, and this is back to the interlude, and give specific feedback. This transition needs to be more like this. This close needs to be more like this. No, this person needs to have more of a mom voice, not a professional political voice, whatever those changes were. And that was the key to the content, was once you have that foundational content of 12 pages and repurposing that every single time for every author, then it's a matter of making very concrete, systematic, and detailed edits, verbally or in typing, for the system to update. And even then, what's our percentage goal, Sam?
80%.
80%. And that's before, and our process is the following. Then it goes from the writer to the structure editor. Then it goes back to the writer. Then it goes to the content, the client manager, to make sure we're getting the client's goals in there. Then it goes back to the writer. Then it goes to the copy editor. Then, and it goes through 2 rounds of fact checking. And Then it goes to the author, a lot of cases, a third-party author, and then we take those edits, and then it goes to the client, and edits the client has, it goes back to the author. So 80% complete is mostly fast tracking that initial writing process. So instead of taking 4 or 5 hours, it takes 1.5. The whole process still takes 3 hours, but it used to take 6 or 7.
Right. Exactly. And you also hit on something else, which I think is really important, which is how do we make sure that in using AI to this level, because I would say that it's an extensive use of it. How do you make sure that it still stays unique? And I will say, I say this to all of my clients that talk to me about AI, is that AI is only as good as the human brain that is powering it. Honestly,
Yep.
it truly is.
Mhm.
And the correlations and the connections that we as humans make cannot be made by AI today, not without a prompt. And
No.
so that is the level of interest when you're starting to create these types of written pieces, is it's all about the main idea, the main objective that isn't being created by AI. That's just that's the beginning piece, and that's what's really very important, and that's how you make sure that your writing doesn't sound like it was written by AI.
Well, and two, that also goes back to the idea of Blair Huddy, who's the one who put that PR people are very good at providing inputs. She and I had a discussion about AI's impact on creativity a few months back. And she was absolutely right that I think just like social media has in some ways reduced creativity, people today don't know how to, we get headaches trying to read long form content. It's easy to doom scroll and waste time and train our brain to fire incorrectly in a lot of ways. I think AI does have that risk, and that's why when you can tell it's been written by AI, it's because there wasn't a human brain really trying to make it better, faster, and smarter. That was just they threw something together and put it up. Versus using AI, just like so I saw a journalist post on LinkedIn that they don't like it when they can tell when they if you're a writer who uses AI to generate LinkedIn content, you're not a real writer. I don't know if I agree with that because if you're stuck one day or you're busy or whatever, but also how is AI today any different than a junior speechwriter for the president of the United States or the head of communications is writing the speech or the op-ed or the presentation for the CEO? I don't think it's any different. It's just a machine. And as you're going to explain, it has to be treated like a junior writing assistant, not like a machine that you just let go.
Correct. Yes. So in the process of creating these AI assistants, where we typically start is the prompt. And again, it's asking, setting that whole thing up, but remembering that this is a junior level assistant that you're working with. And then giving it feedback once you actually start using it, and there's an iterative process that happens, giving it feedback like you would a junior assistant for whatever the task is that it's doing. I have done some HR related assistants, I've done writing related assistants, I've done scheduling assistants, right? Executive level assistants. There's a whole bunch of different ones. So whatever the level of task is, that's you're
Right.
still treating it as a junior level assistant. And so verbally, how would you tell a person who just graduated from college that has never done this before but is now working at your firm, how
Right.
would you tell them to do that? And as that grows, it starts to learn the same way that a human would, but that's essentially what we do. So treating it that way, but then also the most important part, and I think Dustin could probably say this without me prompting, but I'm just going to double check.
Well,
The
no,
most
anyway, just to make
important
sure.
part is
Yep.
the giving the final version after.
So I mentioned earlier processes. This
Yes.
is actually an area where we've been so busy, which is a good thing in growth. But just this week in our weekly internal content meeting, our director of content and I were chatting about this, and I said, this is a step we keep missing
Oh no.
because we had 3 pieces to turn around quickly, so I jumped in. Now, I'm not usually involved in the writing anymore. We have a team of writers, we have the whole process set up, but due to timeline reasons, I jumped in. And I know how to use AI to write the thing. But then there's all these other little details that I know logically, but I have not yet fully integrated. So our director of content, part of his job now is when the piece is being pitched to the media, is to take that draft and put it into the AI system. So the AI system is fully educated on what that should look like.
Yeah.
Because, and so actually, I'm going to disagree with what you said earlier. I can't tell you that because I keep forgetting. And that gets back to really the processes here, because you can learn. I've gotten pretty good at taking a random chat GPT window, not even one that's signed with anybody or having any background, and just getting it to work. But that's not a repeatable process.
Mhm.
That's not a process that we can truly scale in the same way. So the
Right.
director of content's job is also, if someone forgets, usually me, to make that proper profile, is to make the profile and drop the final draft in. So we
Mhm.
are having a fully integrated and growing and smart system.
Mhm.
And that's where the
Right.
human part of it is, because the AI system can't find the final one and drop it in. The human still has to do those process steps.
Mhm. So to kind of pull all this process stuff together
Sure.
into a nice little bow to just kind of wrap out for everyone what the process actually is, what we followed here. It is actually discovery first, and that's finding out what is that thing that is going to help with the most efficiency, right? So that if
Yes.
for us it was pretty easy in this scenario to find out what that was.
Right.
The next one was to gather any information that we would be able to pull together and put into a prompt. So gathering the data. And in this particular case, it was, again, fairly easy. It was, here are the outlets that we're targeting. Here's the syntax that they use. Here's the writers, all of those things. So there's that part. Actually build the assistant. So that's the next step. And then it's that training piece. So the teaching everyone how to give it feedback, how to continue to use it. That's the next step. And then actually using it. Now that's where everything kind of, this isn't unique to you, Dustin, actually, every kind of goes off the rails, right? That's where that change management and pulling everyone back in really becomes
Yeah.
very important, because everyone can take that thing that's learning in real time in 100 different directions, right? 100 different directions. It's amazing how fast, if you were to take one chat GPT assistant and put it in someone else's, how fast they get into different directions.
So different.
Yeah,
So different.
it can be very
Yeah.
quick. So
Mhm.
when everyone starts using it, the way that you ground it and the way that you can continue to train it in a way that makes sense and that they're going to get that great feedback from the business in real time is final drafts. Every final draft for that particular article, whatever you're working on, goes back in, and then it can see the difference between the two. So the prompt is, read this draft, update your internal memory with any differences that you notice. So that's the full process. And then it's just rinse and repeat from there. And that's essentially how we built this whole thing for Proven Media.
Well, and the other thing too is, and I don't remember the exact terms, but there's the foundational content and then there's the individual piece content.
Correct. Yes.
So when we have an author, who we've used 10 times, well, there may be a piece of content like that, a single press release or op-ed that we're updating. We need to say, oh, hey, fix that little thing. But if we notice that becomes a pattern that's inconsistent with the voice,
Mhm.
then we need to go back to that foundational author writing assistant. So there's the writing assistant foundation that Sam created. Then we use that to customize to each author voice. So there's a Dustin voice, there's a Proven Media Solutions corporate voice, and then we have 20 authors for our clients. We have customized to their voices. So in addition to loading that final document in, sometimes there are mistakes that have to be then go to the foundational material and update that so it's a consistent thing.
We called it the writer profile.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. And it automatically, one of the pieces of the prompt when we built the assistant was to part of the 12 pages was the creation of the writer profile. What that assistant was looking for, what was important to them, a whole bunch of different things that we had put in there.
Yep. And that's the key for us too, because we're often writing op-eds on the same topic from different authors. In this particular campaign that allowed us to have that 5x ROI, it was one bill in a single state that was getting a vote, likely getting a vote that week. And our client asked us to produce 5 op-eds. Well, the way we made them all different is one person had a certain relationship with the military that was different than everyone else, and this person lived in that state. So we customized it primarily to the relationship with the family members. Another person has been living in this state. They're a veteran. We use that to say, I love the state. This bill would make it less likely that I can enjoy this state as much as I have. We also targeted national outlets. We were able to target by outlet. So, well, actually, it's by author background and author voice, therefore author voice.
Mhm.
Target by location to a degree. Target by the outlets that we're going after, national outlets, industry outlets. One piece did land at a national public facing outlet. Two landed at outlets that targeted the industry, and two landed inside the state. So we had three different verticals, and that allowed for some really delineated content. Even though there was we call it a sandwich, a storytelling sandwich, where sure the same bill number was mentioned and the same issue set was described, but just like a ham sandwich only has three pieces of ham and a lot more lettuce, if you're disgusting mayonnaise, tomatoes and bread, we still call it a ham sandwich. This was a
Mhm.
bill sandwich wrapped in a lot of different voices, tones, angles, backgrounds, and target audiences that created something that didn't look like it was written by AI.
Yes. And it's really interesting because that what basically what you just described, this entire process, this can be used for any problem. Honestly, any problem. You're sitting down in any business and saying, what are those
Right.
things that we typically would turn over to a junior writer or a more senior
Yeah.
person does that
Yep.
that takes up a lot of their time. And it can be silly things that people don't even think of.
Right.
I mean, I'm working on one right now with a CEO group next week where there's like, well, there's 5 or 6 different industries represented in this CEO group. What could you possibly think of that would resonate across all of them? And I said, well, everyone's trying to hire good people right now. Why don't we do an interview
Right.
assistant? So
Yes.
why don't we do an interview assistant? So what I'm building next week with the CEO group is looking at the resume for the individual, then looking
Yep.
at the job description, comparing the two, flagging any inconsistencies, like what are some red flags, what are some green flags, and then what are 5 questions that I should be asking this person based on that,
Yes. Right.
right?
Exactly.
So
Yep.
it's the same kind of thing. It's just trying to figure out with anything with AI, finding out what is that issue in your business, what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then finding whatever that solution is with AI to be able to do it. And what I've just described in both of these scenarios, for that human resources one for the interview assistant and then this one as well, those are fairly simple bots. They can get way more complicated. Obviously, I have another one
Sure.
that I'm working on that's fairly complicated. That's a product. So there's quite a few interesting scenarios there. But yeah, it really comes down to what is that inefficiency in your business and finding a way to solve it with AI.
And then we've talked about customization quite a bit.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
let's zoom it out to 30,000 feet. How should people think about customization? We've talked a lot about ours as op-eds.
yeah.
We hinted at, but haven't said public policy, at least for that first project.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've talked about third-party authors versus, say, a client's direct spokesperson. Those are things that we had to
Mm-hmm.
be customized to us.
Mm-hmm.
But we're doing a dozen or more op-eds every month, so we have to have a assistant that is replicable, like we can replicate for all these different voices.
Right, yeah.
What are sort of some 30,000 foot ways that people should think about customization, like for this question you asked of that group of CEOs?
Right. Yeah. So those kinds of questions. So whenever I work with a client, I go in and I say, it's the exact same question. It's what are those things that you would typically turn over to someone who is a junior
Oh,
level?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. No,
Yes,
it's I mean it's worth repeating because
sure.
there's so many more examples. And I think another one is sales, right? Everyone right now is working on growing their business,
Yeah.
or most are
Mhm.
growing their business and getting more sales. And I
Right.
think about this all the time, that some of my first jobs would be completely obsolete now
Right.
that we have
Mhm.
AI. Proposal writing assistant. My second job out of college was I worked for an agency, and the majority of what I did was write sales proposals. And they were for enterprise level businesses. We're talking very in-depth things, but it was always the same structure, always the same
Right.
format, just
Right.
adjust. for the individual client, right? So there's so many different ways that that can be used. An onboarding coach. You could actually have an assistant that helps with onboarding for a business. So someone new
Yep.
comes on, there's the same things, same repeatable processes happen every single time. And typically there is a person who does that and updates them. Anything like that, those are the things that you would look at to put into an AI bot.
Now that makes a lot of sense. And I think for a lot of PR firms, a lot of agencies and their their partners and senior executives do talk a lot on LinkedIn about using AI. It's being celebrated. But I do think a lot of journalists are concerned about it, not for their own job, but also for credibility when someone does send them content. And there's also the question of, will a client eventually say, I could have done this, right? This is kind of what I want to close on here is, when we had our prep call yesterday, you can't see the notes. There we go. There they are. The disappearing notes. You hallucinated them because of AI. So the other part of the value add here, in my opinion, is for a PR firm, is those junior positions may be eliminated in the PR world, some of those junior writing positions. But what's going to be enhanced is the human part of what you're doing. So, for example, again, I mentioned earlier, part of our pain point was we want to be able to scale without having to find somebody who may or may not work out. But even if they do, and the client backs off, do we have to let them go?
Mm-hmm.
How does that affect us financially? How does that affect us as a culture? How does that affect that individual who's now been promised this job that no longer exists? AI is always working when everyone's out sick. Everyone can be on vacation. When we had that client push, I'm pretty sure one person was transitioning out, and that was also the same week someone else went on vacation.
Yes.
So we went from having a 6-person team to having a 4-person team overnight, and only 2 of us were able to work on this project, maybe 2.5 of us. AI allowed people to be transitioning out and on vacation, and we didn't miss a beat. But I think the other part is when we talk to our clients, we've actually elevated, I think, in our partnership, because we're not just an op-ed firm. Or an earned media firm. We're not just putting out pitches. We're helping our clients think strategically about narrative and angles and how to stand out from the crowd. And AI can't do that in the same way.
Right.
We're also finding authors. A lot of our public policy clients, public affairs clients, don't want to speak their own brand. We're finding the authors. And AI can't go out and find those people. These are usually friends of ours. These aren't high-powered people. These are everyday people who have an interest in the topic and probably have never been published before. That takes a human relationship. And then getting that person to trust what's going on, trust the process, be involved all the way through, usually the first time they've ever done this. And then pitching it to the editor. Those are all human components. So I think it's actually helped us really refocus a little bit on how we elevate the strategic offerings a human has. Oh, and by the way, we use an AI system to help us write the offense.
I will say this for forever, at least for AI where it sits right now.
Sure.
It is taking away the things that just take time, that are not
Right.
strategic. And it is allowing people to expand into those strategy areas that they might not have had time to do before. That's what it
Right.
does. It is either accelerating those things so that you don't spend as much time, or completely taking them away so that you're able to spend more time being strategic. So where for senior level people in business, doesn't matter if you're a PR firm or you're B2B business, or if you work at a hospital for that matter, all of
Right.
those things, it is looking at where are you going to be most effective? What are the things that only you can do? And let's
Right.
have you doing those things instead of all of these other areas where an AI assistant would be able to do it with the right training.
Yeah, and I remember when ChatGPT came out, we actually had an AI client, which is kind of laughable given the knowledge of AI that I had at the time. But we were supporting a marketing firm. A month after this client was onboarded with us, ChatGPT came out. Suddenly nobody cared about our clients' $9 million of investments, and there are a couple of huge clients they had because ChatGPT was sucking all the wind out of the room. I didn't even know what generative AI was. We had barely onboarded the client. But one of the things that they said has always stuck with me. They were citing a few months later, Stanford had a study and found that frontline employees were not being replaced. They were being made more efficient by 14% on average.
Yes. Yes.
But the client's constant drumbeat was, And he was such a nerd about AI. It was great. He said, I am so excited to replace boring things,
Mm-hmm.
replace boring everyday work so people can be elevated. And
Yes.
again, that's what we found was with that one client. I would have been normally working till midnight. There's an op-ed in the comments section, the op-ed version of this conversation, laying out the step-by-step process that we worked with Sam on. I would have been up till midnight. My kids would have forgotten what I looked like. My wife would not have been happy with me missing all those dinners for a week and a half. But because of AI, I don't think I missed any. I don't think I ever worked past 10 p.m. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I'm the founder of the company. No one else works that hard. No, sure, should they? Not asking anyone else to work till 10. But even though we were absolutely ferociously busy with this normal work plus this elevated client situation, AI allowed us to really accelerate those outcomes.
Fantastic. That's exactly what it's there for, and that's what it should do.
And that's what it did.
Yeah.
So now you mentioned earlier hospitals and other situations. Everyone, next week at noon Eastern, it's going to be myself, Sam, and Trish. We're going to be talking about the same conversation here, but elevated to the corporate level. Trish has worked in AI, like Sam. She has a strong technology background, and she said something to me on a phone call a couple of months ago. She said, chief communications officers and similar people in corporate aren't just going to be needing to prove real value. It's not just going to be using an AI bot that is already created. It's going to be creating junior writing assistants as part of your strategic operational sense and capabilities. I mentioned this to Sam. She said, well, yeah, of course I agree with that. So
Absolutely.
next week, we're going to take this conversation today, which was at a team level. We're a small agency, and we're going to be elevating that into the corporate conversation, especially as companies are looking to hire the perfect candidate who's never going to leave and do everything right with a limited budget. And so this is going to be part of the conversation of how you create more value at the corporate level, both in terms of perceived value, but actual output without missing a beat. So we'll see you all in 167 hours or so. Thanks, Sam. This was a lot of fun. Thank you for walking through this with us.
Thanks again, Dustin. I always appreciate coming. Thank you.
Bye.